So, me and my bro watched the 3 episodes of What If. Though they're all enjoyable, we have interesting opinion about some of them. Some don't make sense, some break the canon, and some are just bluntly copy of classic movie. So, how about we start with the first episode, Captain Carter. Red Blue, take the lead.
The first episode was the definition of fine. Not great, not bad, fine. The animation is great, don't get me wrong, it is, but it's still a worse version of the first Captain America movie, because it was shorter, like 30 minutes short, making it feel like reading the Wikipedia page for the movie, but with a different main character, in this case being Peggy, as in this What If she took on the super soldier serum, and as you would expect, she is doing a fine job with it, but also the same that Steve did, like it's almost the same story at that point, as what they changed didn't affect much, except make her a little better than Steve. I mean, in her timeline, she managed to get the Tesseract as the first thing she'd do as Captain Carter. And yes, getting the Tesseract at the start of a movie where it's the main weapon powering the enemy seemed like a big deal. But no, the movie still play almost exactly the same. Like after that, she saved Bucky like Steve did, but the role are reversed between Peggy and Steve, where Peggy is the superhero and Steve is the one helping her as the support. No, something is actually different. Steve is Iron Man in this. No, wait, the Hydra Stomper, I think? He is just Iron Man in this. The explanation is that Howard Stark made that suit with the Tesseract as the power source, which seemed like it could make sense at first, but no, because in the classic MCU timeline, he had access to the Tesseract for at the bare minimum 5 years, as after the first Captain America movie, the SHIELD, which is co-founded by him, found the Tesseract, so he had access to it in one way or another, and he never made that suit, never even tried, so it made no sense that in this What If he can. But getting back to the episode, it's still the first Avenger again, like sometimes it diverged but then go back to the movie almost exactly like it was, but this time Bucky never seemingly dies, so he won't become the Winter Soldier. Instead, Steve as the Hydra Stomper get killed by Hydra, or so it seems. Other than that, it's back to the movie until the final fight. Well, it's back to its 30-minute version. So as I was saying, Peggy then go fight the Red Skull once and for all, which is funny because in that it's the first time they met. And remember the kinda stupid plan the Red Skull had with the bomb in the movie? Well, now he has an almost as stupid plan, like summon a monster which may or may not be Hive, probably not honestly. And how does he do it? With the Tesseract. See, nothing changed in this episode from the event of the movie. The detail changed, but not the outcome. So yeah, Bucky learned that Steve is alive because that also didn't change. Steve then go help Peggy as Iron Man, a Hydra Stomper, and Peggy sacrificed herself to save everyone in a similar scene than the one in the first Captain America, to then be brought back in the present day, like Steve did. In the end, the details were not the same, but it was still the same movie. Like, I get the feminist message that she is as good a hero as Steve is, but they could have still passed that idea and tell a unique story. Like, why watch that ever again if every emotional anchor of that episode is a cheapened out version of one in the movie? If you are going to botch the war harder than the movie did, don't do it. Show us the larger scale effect of that movie. Like, okay, Steve being the Hydra Stomper doesn't make much sense, so then roll with it. Show us a world where Tony sold that technology when he was a weapon dealer, a world where the best gun is an Iron Man suit. If Bucky doesn't become the Winter Soldier, then Tony's parent never dies. Also, no civil war. If Peggy is the one that sacrificed herself, it means that Steve is the one that co-created the SHIELD in this universe. What does it mean for the SHIELD? You know, they could have done anything but the first movie in a less interesting way. I mean, make the episode a look at Peggy getting those powers from when she get them at the start to her end game after fighting Thanos.
And doing a copy of the Captain America movie is a problem too, as it was highly implied in the original timeline that Steve was the only one that should be Captain America. Good become great and bad become worse. That's the reason why Steve was chosen, because he can't be corrupted. But that what if implied that Peggy is as qualified as Steve for the job, which is kind of a waste of a what if story where we could have seen her stay a good guy but still get too cocky with her power, making mistake that Steve wouldn't have. That way we could have seen a different Captain America that make more mistake or different action to Steve instead of just having another almost exactly the same Captain America. And it kinda make it seem like Steve was not the perfect choice for Captain America and just another choice like any other. As Carter not only becomes stronger than he was, but maybe even stronger than him. There's nothing she did worse in this what if, she even managed to save Bucky when Steve wasn't. All that made her seem like a better hero than Steve was, and even if that wasn't the point of the what if, that's kind of what it's implied, and that's a little disrespectful to the character of Steve Rogers.
Like I was enjoying myself, don't get me wrong, it's not bad, but I wish it was better, you know?
Okay, the episode 2 is actually an improvement on some aspect, but big downgrade on others. I couldn't help but feel like the writer did such a poor job at making this story, well, make sense. There's so many plot hole and nonsensical moments that make this what if a bit annoying to watch for me. But keep in mind that this episode is still enjoyable to some extent, but there's just so many problems that they could have fixed if they really thought about it and tried to make a story that makes sense within the context of the MCU. But yeah, there's some fun to be had. Some part of the story are really enjoyable. Seeing Thanos that is a good guy is also fun. Seeing interaction in the MCU, seeing Thanos talking about his plan and all that, that's all really fun. But what I really want to talk about is how nonsensical it was. So let's go. Okay, so first off, this what if scenario was what if T'Challa becomes Star-Lord. So how do they do it? What is the logical way of explaining why instead of kidnapping the son of Ego like they were supposed to, they decide to kidnap the Prince of Wakanda? So what was their explanation? Well, apparently Yondu's men couldn't tell the difference between those two. That guy that looked like a human couldn't see the difference between those two. Yeah. Okay, so let's say it's a joke, and it was written as a joke, so let's say that for the joke we suspend our disbelief. It's still a lazy way to make a what if, because the concept of a what if is changing one element in the timeline and seeing how it affects everything that happened after, you know? But the change that they decide to make in this episode is making Yondu's man so stupid that they can't tell the difference between those two kids. I don't know, it just make this concept feel less interesting that way. And really lazy. They could have thought of a better way to make T'Challa Star-Lord, that's all I'm saying. Okay, so now that Yondu got this kid on his ship, now that they figure out that they got the wrong one, well, of course, they did the logical thing and keep that kid on board of their ship. Because when the kid looked at space, he was like, wow, that's cool. So they decide, yo, we need to keep that kid, man. That kid, he needs to stay on board of our ship. Fuck that we got the wrong one. That kid, we keep him, man. Well, that makes no sense and goes against everything the character of Yondu was about. In the original movie, he kidnapped the son of Ego for money, but when he realized how fucked up that was, he decided to keep him to protect him from his dad, because Ego ate his son. So that makes sense. It wasn't because he was an explorer or some shit. Peter thought Yondu was a bad guy because he kidnapped him, but in fact he decided to keep him to protect him. But in this version, he actually kidnapped a random kid and told him his family was dead because he liked him or some shit. In this version, he actually kidnapped a kid for no valid reason, and that's fucked, and goes against everything his character is about. Then years later, we learn that T'Challa becomes Star-Lord, the hero of the galaxy that everyone loved. Well, first of all, his name being Star-Lord is showing a lack of understanding by the writer of the story and lore of Peter Quill. Peter Quill's name is Star-Lord because he called himself that. He wanted to be known as Star-Lord because when he was a child, his mom would tell him stories about space. She made him the protagonist of those stories and called him Star-Lord. This name comes from an emotional part of his story, and naming T'Challa that for no reason make the name feel worthless to me and weird. Like T'Challa doesn't deserve it in a sense. It's like saying, well, if Flash lived in Gotham, he would be Batman. That's not how that would work. Batman is not Batman because he lives in Gotham. And the same goes for Peter Quill. Peter Quill is not Star-Lord because he's in space. You can't just say that Flash in Gotham would be Batman. That is taking away meaning out of the mantle of Batman, and same goes for Star-Lord. It might not bother you, but as someone who is a huge fan of Star-Lord, it tilts me personally, and it shows that the writer doesn't understand the character they're writing about.
Like it's not because two characters end up taking the same role that they would have shared the same name. I mean, I do not expect every of those episodes to be a masterpiece, but it takes away from the story when the writer cannot seem to write 30-minute episode without a mistake like this.
Okay, with all that out of the way, why is T'Challa a better Star-Lord? That makes no sense at all. They both were kids when they were kidnapped. How does those two kids, kind-hearted kid, become so drastically different when they were both basically raised by Yondu? In the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, Quill was raised by him, and it explained why he become how he is. Sure, he has some of his mom's personality trait, but he is a Ravager like his dad. Same should apply for T'Challa. I would have understand if a older T'Challa would have become Star-Lord, cause he would have been a wise king, but at that specific moment of their life, he shouldn't be any better than Quill. And the crazy part is that the show acts like T'Challa would have made everything better, and this is really insulting for the character of Peter Quill. Like there's literally nothing Peter did better than T'Challa, and that is pretty annoying and unrealistic. Imagine if they did a what if story where Batman is Superman from Man of Steel, and in this what if Batman would have beat Zod without any casualty and destruction. It's again taking away from the original character, and it is doing so in a really poorly written way at that.
I get that it was made for a joke on how cool he is, like he is a king everywhere, and yeah, it's fun, the episode is funny, but when you think about it, some of the stuff in the episode seem pretty far-fetched, like how he convinced the Mad Titan to stop his plan, to not snap the universe away, well, half the universe. Like, even if the Black Panther from the normal MCU could have, which I doubt, would the one from What If, the one that isn't a king? Because you are not born a king, you become one. And remember, the one in the movie couldn't even talk down his own cousin. So yeah, pretty weird if you ask me.
And finally, Thanos is kinda weak. I don't want to get too much into detail here, but he kinda get beat up by two of his goons, which is not really something we expect from Thanos. Thanos is the big bad guy of the MCU, but here he's just, he's kinda strong, and that is a bit disappointing. And this makes him seem like such a pushover, and again, this is a lack of respect for the original version of the character. Yeah, oh, I almost forgot, the Collector managed to beat Thor and Hela? Excuse me if this seems unlikely to me. I mean, come on, Hela was way stronger than Thor in Ragnarok, and you're telling me that this dude beat her. That guy that fight against Black Panther in this episode and doesn't easily kill him with his power. Come on. And even if he sent Thanos' goon to kill her, that wouldn't have happened. She is way stronger than those guys. You see, the thing with those what if story is that they had the endless potential to show you how a slight change in the timeline could change everything. But instead, they just decide to tell their own story regardless of if it makes sense. If those were standalone story, they would have worked better, but they are marketed as alternative version of the MCU. So with that said, they should follow the logic of those movies. But those two episodes doesn't. As popcorn flick you watch for fun without thinking too much about it, they are fun. But as soon as you think about the logic behind those alternative worlds, it kinda make no sense. And that is a shame. But really, those two episodes are fun if you suspend your disbelief, but there's so many inconsistencies that it make it a bit annoying to watch.
The third episode of What If is much better than the other two, and fixed a lot of issues that those previous story had. So in this one, the Avengers are all getting killed one by one throughout this episode. So it's kinda a murder mystery. It's fun because while the story progresses, you try to figure out who's the killer. Like, maybe it's Hydra, or Loki changing form, or some other villain that I'm not thinking about right now. And plus, we have a lot of movie worth of lore to work with, and for fans it was pretty fun to try to put pieces together. So there was also like a big mystery behind it. It's also awesome that while you follow Fury during his investigation, you can see the behind the scene of some of the classic Marvel movie from the point of view of the Shield. It adds new information to the MCU, and it's always nice to know more. I like that in this episode you can see more clearly what's changing from this what if. They show how this universe is altered, with Loki that actually conquered Earth and Fury calling back Captain Marvel much more earlier. It all feels natural and logical how the little difference make this divergent later on. What I love in this episode is that when you finally find out who's the killer, it's a good twist. It makes sense that Payman could have killed all the Avengers with his tech, especially at the stage the Avengers were at. I really appreciate they made him Yellow Jacket when he was a bad guy and acting crazy and stuff. They even took his comic design while still having the MCU helmet. I mean, it's not impossible that finding his daughter died while having the pin particle affecting his brain would have pushed him toward insanity and making him kill everyone. And plus, it also subverted the pre-established fact that you thought the what if was about if the Avenger dies. But it's actually what if Hope had worked with S.H.I.E.L.D. By the way, what if finally confirmed the Incredible Hulk in the MCU? And I'm not saying it wasn't, but I felt like they didn't want to talk about it, especially because it wasn't Mark Ruffalo back then. But, now it proved it, so cool.
In the end, only episode 3 managed to hit our expectation. The two first episodes have good stuff about them, but they don't make much sense when you think about it. But episode 3 was surprising, interesting, and didn't break the already established canon of the MCU. And that is how, in our opinion, they should do what if stories. Hopefully the rest of those will be more like episode 3 and less like the other two. And if episode 4 follow in the footsteps of episode 3, then that's all good. We will keep watching and we hope you enjoyed this video and subscribe to help the channel. Well, peace out.